The world awoke to a jolt on an otherwise calm Friday, as headlines blazed across screens and newsrooms buzzed with urgency. Journalists rushed to confirm the story, their expressions a mix of shock and excitement. In a move that stunned many, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down President Trump's hallmark tariff initiative, an outcome few saw coming, and even fewer expected so quickly. The reaction on Wall Street was electric. The Dow Jones rocketed upward within moments. Traders erupted in cheers, and a wave of relief swept through the financial heart of New York as years of market anxiety seemed to evaporate. Across Europe, German carmakers and French luxury giants watched their shares climb, finally free from the looming threat of steep U.S. tariffs. European markets, long on edge, exhaled in collective relief as the news spread. The ruling signaled a return to predictability for global trade. Shipping firms and exporters, who'd been navigating a maze of shifting regulations and costs, could now see a clearer horizon. In Asia, markets in Shanghai and Seoul surged as tech and manufacturing companies, key players in the world's supply chain, welcomed the decision. The ripple effect was instant, with optimism spreading across the region. Billions spent on rerouting supply chains and absorbing tariff costs suddenly felt like history. Executives began dusting off expansion plans and investment proposals, hopeful that a steadier era was dawning. The sense of relief wasn't limited to boardrooms. On factory floors and in offices, workers and employees celebrated the promise of job security and renewed growth, knowing their livelihoods were tied to global trade. The explosive surge in global markets told its own story. U.S. policy decisions echo worldwide. Every uptick on the charts underscored just how interconnected our economies truly are. For investors, business leaders, and governments, the Supreme Court's verdict was more than a legal ruling. It was a pivotal moment. It closed the chapter on uncertainty and opened the door to a new era in international commerce. The turbulent period of trade wars appeared to be drawing to a close, replaced by a cautious optimism. Companies began to rebuild partnerships and supply chains, looking forward to a more stable future. The dramatic market rally was a clear vote of confidence in a more predictable world. Investors, once wary of abrupt policy swings, now saw fresh opportunities for growth and collaboration. Around the globe, people tuned in as news anchors dissected the day's events. From living rooms to public squares, everyone understood these decisions would shape their futures. The day's events highlighted the deep ties binding the global economy. From bustling metropolises to quiet towns, the Supreme Court's decision sent ripples that touched lives everywhere. The Supreme Court's action sent a powerful message. Order was returning to the rules of global trade. Legal experts and policymakers recognized the moment as a restoration of balance and stability. For all involved, it was a hopeful turning point, a chance for renewed cooperation and trust. As the dust settled, the world looked forward, united by the promise of shared prosperity and a steadier future. Long before the Supreme Court's verdict was even on the horizon, a warning was already being sounded in Washington. Former House Speaker Paul Ryan, a prominent figure in the Republican Party, had voiced serious concerns about the shaky legal ground of the administration's tariff strategy. Ryan, respected for his policy expertise, predicted that the court would ultimately rule against the president's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. He argued that this wasn't just another partisan disagreement or a routine policy debate. It was a fundamental challenge to the Constitution's separation of powers, a principle at the very core of American democracy. Ryan criticized the tariffs as unpredictable and damaging, warning that they were already hurting American industries, disrupting supply chains, and putting unnecessary strain on families across the country. He believed the policy created more problems than it solved, with severe long-term consequences for workers, small businesses, and the broader economy. At the heart of the issue was a basic constitutional principle. Congress, not the president, has the authority to regulate commerce and set tariffs, ensuring a balance of power. By invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, President Trump bypassed Congress, a move Ryan called a significant overreach of executive authority, setting a dangerous precedent for future administrations. Ryan's warning was clear and direct. The courts would eventually have to step in to protect the legislative branch's vital role in economic decision-making. His foresight proved accurate, as the Supreme Court echoed his concerns, reaffirming that major economic decisions require Congress's involvement and cannot be made unilaterally by the executive branch. Ryan's stance demonstrated that the opposition wasn't just about politics or party lines. It was about preserving the constitutional balance of power that underpins the entire American system of government. The legal battle centered on a single, pivotal question that would have far-reaching consequences for the nation. Could the president use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, even in situations that stretched beyond immediate emergencies? Businesses and industry leaders argued that the law was never intended for long-term broad tariffs, only for true, urgent emergencies that threaten national security or stability. They claimed the president was overstepping, taking powers that the Constitution had reserved for Congress, and bypassing the checks and balances designed to prevent executive overreach. The U.S. Court of International Trade agreed with the challengers, ruling that the president had exceeded his legal authority under IEEPA. The government quickly appealed the decision, keeping the controversial tariffs in place as the case moved up the judicial ladder, drawing national attention. At the Court of Appeals, the debate intensified, with both sides presenting arguments about the limits of presidential power and the intent behind IEEPA. Did IEEPA give the president a blank check to act unilaterally, or was Congress's crucial role in economic policy being erased by executive action? The case quickly became a constitutional showdown, raising fundamental questions about who truly controls America's economic fate in times of crisis. Was it the president, acting alone with sweeping authority, or Congress, through open debate and careful legislation, that should decide the nation's economic direction? The journey through the courts was more than a legal process. It was a collision of two competing visions of presidential power and the future of American democracy. The final decision would not only resolve this case, but also shape the balance of power between the branches of government for generations to come. Beyond the legal drama, tariffs hit American businesses and families hard. In Ohio, a family-owned manufacturer saw steel costs jump 25% overnight, forcing tough choices: absorb losses or raise prices. Across the country, small businesses, from bike shops to construction firms, faced higher costs, threatening their survival. For families, everyday items like canned goods and school supplies became more expensive, straining household budgets. The hidden cost of the trade war was felt at kitchen tables and factory floors, not just in Washington. Supporters called it a necessary sacrifice, but many saw only hardship without clear benefits. These stories became central to the national conversation, highlighting the real impact of policy decisions. Business owners and workers waited for relief, hoping for stability to return. The consequences were lived every day, far from the halls of power. The country was split. Some saw tariffs as vital protection for American jobs, others as harmful taxes on consumers. Supporters argued tariffs defended against unfair foreign competition and revived industries like steel. They believed short-term pain was worth long-term economic security and independence. Critics, including many economists, warned tariffs raised prices for everyone and risked trade wars. They championed free trade, pointing to complex global supply chains disrupted by tariffs. The debate was about more than economics. It was about America's role in the world. Two visions clashed: protectionism versus global integration. The legal fight began when American importers sued, claiming the president misused emergency powers. The Court of International Trade sided with them, declaring the tariffs unlawful. The government appealed, keeping the tariffs in place and businesses in limbo. At the Court of Appeals, arguments intensified over the president's authority versus congressional power. The appeals court upheld the lower ruling, setting the stage for a Supreme Court showdown. The government urged the justices to resolve this issue of national importance. The Supreme Court agreed, recognizing the fundamental questions at stake. The nation waited for a final answer on a policy that had reshaped the economy. The outcome would determine the future balance of power in trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision marked a historic moment for the balance of power in America. The court blocked the use of IEEPA for broad tariffs, affirming Congress's authority over trade. The ruling drew a clear line: major economic policies must go through the legislative process. For the presidency, a powerful unilateral tool was now off the table. Future presidents must work with Congress or use more restrictive laws. The decision shifted trade policy power back to Capitol Hill, ensuring broader support and stability. The court didn't judge the merits of tariffs, only who decides. By siding with Congress, the court reinforced the foundation of American democracy. With the Supreme Court's decision, American businesses and families look forward to more predictable trade rules. The removal of tariffs brings immediate relief, lower costs for manufacturers and families alike. Looking ahead, future presidents must negotiate and build consensus in Congress to use tariffs. This could mean a more stable, thoughtful approach to trade, reducing uncertainty for businesses. The debate over protectionism versus free trade will continue in politics, not the courts. The decision puts trade policy in the hands of the people and their representatives. America now faces a choice: return to free trade, or seek a new balance between global integration and domestic protection. The Supreme Court has set the constitutional framework for the journey ahead.